Hello everyone, welcome to Las Vegas, Nevada. Hi, I'm Matthias, aka Major VFX, here at the Maxon booth for NAB 2024. We have been showcasing amazing artists. Hopefully everybody online, you're tuned in around the world, you've been enjoying it. We have more for you this afternoon. So next up, to my left, is our very own, we've worked with you for many years. You guys have done a number of different projects with us and everything else, so super excited. Let's put our hands together and a warm welcome for PJ from Laundry.
Hello. Oh, there we go. Yay! I'm a little hopefully better at C4D than microphones. But my name's PJ Richardson. I'm from a studio called Laundry in LA and San Francisco and New York. First off, I want to thank Karan, Lily, the Maxon team, and of course you guys for being here. You know, by day, I work at the studio as a creative director. By night, weekends, I'm a 3D artist, design dailies, C4D, redshift. And I thought I'd go through a couple different projects today. And this is my first technical talk. I'm a little nervous. I'll either go too fast or too slow, but we'll go through stuff and see and kind of just run out the clock with some things. You know, a lot of my work plays entirely in cinema, really colorful, a lot of shapes, a lot of abstractions, a lot of like lighting and texture, really just kind of always constantly experimenting with different sort of layouts and compositions, lighting, everything from diffuse lighting to more studio lighting stuff, a lot of reflection work, a bit of character stuff as well. And constantly just kind of playing entirely in the Maxon sandbox. So what I thought I would do for this first project, this was a series that I did use for shape-based using heavily 3D tracking, and I thought that was something that I could take us through today. I made these on Instagram and did a whole series of them. Some like this. Some like this. Some like this. You guys kind of get the general idea, but and what I really got excited about was using the 3D tracker in particularly as a base for some of these experiments. So I thought I would break this shot down a bit and sort of show you how I got there. This was a drone footage shot that I shot in Iceland and then brought in all the shapes in cinema, redshift, and the tracker. So let's jump back out for a second. So the way that I did it was I used a DJI Air 2S drone to shoot this footage and use that as my base, and I knew I kind of wanted to put stuff on top of it. It was stabilized already, color corrected for the most part. And then in cinema, we can kind of break down, let's see if I can try to do this live using the track. Oh wait, where's my tracking? Ooh, hold on, usually there's, bear with me. That's fine. I can, oh wait, where did everything go? Where? Hold on, as I kind of find all of this. Ooh, they moved everything around here a little bit. Off to a bumpy start here, but hang with me. So basically, I'm gonna see if I can recreate this in here like this. The way I got there was starting first with the footage. I rendered out an image sequence from the drone footage, and here we go. So I brought it in. There's this thing here, you can brighten it, and you can basically take, you know what, it's gonna pop up here in a second. Well, that thinks about it a little bit. So basically you load your footage in here, then you go into your 2D tracking, and wait, why is it not? And then basically what you do is the tracker is going to pick points in your footage. And so you go in here and it gives you a default of, I think, 300. I pick 1,000. It basically lets me pick 1,000 points on any given frame. And then what you do is you can come down here and create auto tracks, which it kind of does it frame by frame to sort of find it. And then I can move forward, add more. Well, basically what I do is you move to different points on the timeline, you create tracks, it becomes sort of like manual tracking points, and then you auto track it, and it then processes the frames and creates sort of a first pass of a track. You know what, I'm gonna cancel out of this here for a second. Sorry, guys. But essentially what it's doing is it's picking points along your direction, adding tracking marker points to it. And the thing that's really cool about that is once it then tracks it in, I can pick those points to assign nulls and sort of 0-point axes and figure out where to put my animation based off the tracking markers that it picks up on. Well, this is fun. But one of the things that's really cool about it is when it does it, it turns it into a physical space that then I can place my objects in, like these shapes here, these patterns, and then be able to play with. And one of the other things I'm going to show is how to get sort of reflections in that aren't reflections on the whole entire shot, but just on sections. Hang with me. All right. Okay, where are we at here? All right, we're almost back. So I'm going to skip the whole sort of tracking part that we don't have to wait to process. But what you can see here is basically all these green tracking points here, right? And then once I go down here, based on those, I can then play with things like I add the camera position, which is basically I can pick any one of these tracking points. Wow, this really is. And assign a position to it via the position constraint. Secondarily, I can add a vector constraint, and what this does is I pick two different points. Essentially, it adds a bar that connects the two here, and then that becomes your horizontal axis. It lets the tracker know that it's it kind of where to put the grid. And then the third one is you pick, it's called a planar thing, and you basically pick 3, create a triangle, and then from there, I can add a plane object, which then becomes sort of my 0 point. So you can see it kind of here. This becomes like where I place a plane, where I can place objects, and kind of go from there. Now, what's cool about that is that I can then use it as like a null and put all of my objects inside of it and zero it out. And what this helps with, no matter how good the track is, it helps from objects slipping too much in any given direction, left or right, or looking like they're not attached to the track. Now, after that, I kind of already did that in this file. So then after that, I put in, let's see if we can get this to show up here. Wait for it. But then what I essentially do is I take stuff like this. Wow. Our favorite spinning beach ball here. But what I'm really doing is taking a series of cloner objects, I'm putting shapes and colors in them, stacking them up vertically, and then with a formula effector that offsets the position and sliding of it all, create this sort of warping, looping kind of sort of pulsing effect that's really all just procedural running off of the formula effector. And then in certain cases, like where they overlap, I'm using a metaball system to kind of glue them together. So what that does is it lets me control the speed of them. It lets me control the... Wow. So when... So like when I'm down here, I'm dropping my cylinders, which are just these basic cylinders in here, into the stack. I could do this with a multi-shader, but I like the control of it where I can then like rearrange them. I can play with the sizing individually, the coloring. And then I go to the formula effector here, which I add on, which is just basically an add-on to the cloner object, which I can do here. And then I go in and basically just play with super simple things like the speed, because this can be really, really fast and crazy. So I just slow it down to like 0.2. And then we get to start to see, you can start to see that it just kind of does its thing. And then what I'm really doing is just stacking a bunch of different versions of these in space. I'm going in for stuff like this, like these little guys here. And it's instead of doing it on a vertical linear cloner, I'm just going into the radial here, and I'm putting it on a Z and Y, and then I'm just playing with the count to get different densities of these cool little guys going on here. And then again, with the formula effector, I'm going into here and I'm playing off of just the scale of the pulsing so that it, does it go, playing with the loops of the sizing of them that way, trying to get little things going on there. Just lots of little subtleties. And then the big thing that's really cool about this that I like to help kind of blend it all in, which, let's see if we can relink it here while we're here. Here we go. This is going to make it all kind of come together a little bit better, I think. Is that going to do it? Because this next part's kind of a cool part to this. So basically what I'm doing to get the footage to show up in here is I'm using a dome light, and in here I'm going into the backplate, and then I'm linking the video, the PNG sequence as the sequence behind it, and then in animation, I go down here, detect frames, it figures out how many frames are in there, and then it becomes my backdrop. Now, there's one part to this, though, that's sort of crucial to get it to integrate in. Wow, it's taking a second to show up in the viewer. But I have this plane down here, right? And I want to get that to kind of pick up on the shadows, yet see through the footage. And this is the easiest way to use the backplate thing and then have the shadows kick up. There's a ground plane, super simple. You add a redshift object tag, and then you go into this matte section, and you go override, enabled shadows, and then down here you turn the shadow on and off, and suddenly all that geo will kick down onto the plane, give you shadows, but then you're using your dome light for the projection behind the whole thing, which is making it all kind of sing together. Now, there you go. All right, so now you can kind of see where you see the shadows on the water, you see the reflections, all of that. Now, there's one part, let's see if it'll do it here. It's coming in a little dark here, but you can see kind of how on the ground, you have like the ground and the road, and then you have the water, and the water is really all you want to reflect. You don't really want, like, if we had real reflection on the ground, it would look completely messed up. So I figured out this trick where I took the footage. We're not going to do it here, but I'll tell you that I basically took it through Runway AI. I went in and did the green screen effect on it and basically isolated out the water as the sort of the roto. It took minutes. You could do it kind of frame by frame. It kind of it gets you a nice roto of that clip. And then what I did was I went back in and in the, oh, actually, hold on. This part is really cool. Let me see, where is it? This one, where'd that go? Ah. Shoot. Let me see if I can do this here real fast. There's this thing called a camera map, and I think I'm going to get this to connect. But basically what it can kind of serve as is a way to it's basically a mat, and it can become this like, hopefully this works. Long story short, what it is I'm isolating out, I'm adding a texture, and then using the mat, and then putting it on the surface of that plane that's kicking off the shadow. And this should only let me show the part that I want to reflect. And that way it isolates out, it keeps my ground diffused, it keeps my water reflective, and it basically allows it so that I can only have the things reflect that I want to reflect, which you'll see kind of here. And so that becomes this really cool trick to like pinpoint out things. You don't need to do expensive roto, you're just using AI to help with that, and then you kind of go and sort of keep going on that. What else in this shot can I tell you about? That's kind of basically the bulk of it, but that's it in a nutshell. So jumping in, let's look at some other stuff that plays in this world. What would a talk be without some AI, huh? I don't use AI in any of my cinema stuff, but I do have this plugin for Midjourney called Insight Face that lets me put my face on Midjourney renders. So I thought I'd entertain you guys with a little bit of fun mischief that I have there. But really, the next one is this one. This is some of my work often focuses around this character work, and this was a piece that I did and posted from a series I did based off of walk cycles and combining shapes in Cinema 4D and redshift in sort of unusual ways. Now, the way that I first started on that was basically just with a series of texture map explorations and material explorations. But then I wanted to see it in motion, and so I did this series with this dancer character. And we can kind of break this down a little bit. So you can see, so the way I started with this was I got a walk cycle from Miximo, and it's basically, it's just a very simple sort of walk cycle, and it has the, you know, the legs, the spine, the head, the arms, and the bones, and it came with Geo already attached to it for certain parts of the body, but I decided to take certain parts off, like the pants, and instead I did this thing where I'm basically taking I picked the right, you know, each leg, each body part, each joint. I add a null to it. So this is one null for the hip. This is one null for the knee. This is one null for the ankle, right? And then I added a tracer into the scene. And then in the tracer, I basically took all those nulls that I added into the joints, dropped them in here, here, and here. And what it does is the tracer basically creates a spline of sorts. Then I took a cloner object here, and instead of linear or radial like I've been doing on that other piece, I made it object-based. And I dropped first the left leg tracer into here, and that gave me this very sort of, and then within that cloner, I basically added a sphere, and that basically creates the repetition along that leg. Then I went down and I added a formula effector similar to that tracking shot, which goes here, and then it became sort of the moving. Oh, I broke it. It becomes sort of the moving leg for that left leg, and then I did the same thing on the right leg. Now, the thing about that is helpful is that it lets me keep it all procedural. So like here, if I decide it's too much, I go doop, 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 doop. And then, as you can see, it just simplifies. And then if I go here, I can control the radius here and make it a thin leg, and it's sort of hard to see, but let's see if we can get it. Oh yeah, it's not linking it all up. But you can start to see what I'm starting to do here. Now, at the same time, with the background, instead of making the character walk forward in one scene to be able to control all of this, I'm basically going down here, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm taking a cloner object, I'm putting some different shapes in it, and then in this case, I'm really just hand animating the movement of the cloner object for the background behind it. Now, the reason I did it that way is so that I could create a sense of parallax and slow down certain ones from others. So like this one will be a little bit faster, or these foreground ones, I can start to play with physical space a little bit more just by hand animating them, and then again also being able to control, you know, the amount of them that I have. I can come down here and say I want it to be super crazy, and so on and so forth. And then at the same time, this lets me just sort of play with the speed of it too. Now, the reason that I did this like this and used one walk cycle was because in this piece you can see here, it's doing the exact same walk cycle, and then it changes artwork completely, but it match frames. So by using one single mocap piece, then I can come in here and change the artwork and the shapes out of the cloner objects so that I get a completely different look for the next shot, and then a completely different look for the next shot. And what then also happens is, like on the one where there was hair, I come into here, I take the shirt here, I use it as my starting point, and then woo, add hair, and that becomes the basis of the hairy shot in that one. Now, hair is a little bit crazy and unruly in general, although as rad as it is. So I lower the length a lot. In this case, every bit counts because hair can be super intense, and it's probably going to break this machine, but it can be super intense. So I even go down to the segments, I lower those, and then if I really want to, in the hair setting, I can go down here. I kind of start cheap with the amount of render, what I think will be render intensive, and then sort of go from there. Now, the thing that's sort of fun about this is then I also come over to here, and where is it? Oh. And I relax it first so that it almost relax it. And then, so you see it starts to, and there's little pops that happen particularly at the beginning here. But I think the way that we solve for that is one very simple way, which is to cache it. Or not, actually. Why isn't it doing it? Huh. Well, generally that's how if I cache it, it lets it sort of render and play back a lot simpler, a lot faster, which you can already kind of see start to happen here. Now, like this animation above, so I'm doing the formula thing on the legs, and then there's that one where there's the holes right there. Now, the way I do that is I simply go back in. Let's kill this for a second. I go back into here, kill my sphere, and then I go into this guy here. Whoa, that's really big. Oh, wait. All right, we'll do it manually. And then that's it. It basically becomes this, but it does start to do funny little rotation things like that, which I think has to do with how much I fill in or how much I use the spline as like as the tracer. So the way around that, you can kind of see I already started to do it here, where if you play with the start and the stop point, it lets it kind of behave a little bit better. For some reason, 0 to a 100 tends to freak it out a little bit. Let's see if it's gonna. It's still kind of acting funky, but I tend to play around with that to figure out how to get it to kind of behave itself a little bit. And then the other way that often works really well here is to come down and play with the type of spline that you make. So when I do it as like a uniform spline, that tends to even out the spacing on the splines in a much nicer way that tends to behave itself just a little bit better. It's still being boopy, but it starts to sort of get there. So that's kind of the general sort of way I tackle this one. Next up, to take it a step further, this was another project that I worked on that went a lot crazier, and we don't have time to break it down fully, but I will show you some cool little things on this that I learned. So that was basically a loop that and it was based off of the like Instagram sort of Nerf videos of like footage, people doing a fashion footage of like the camera slamming in and out. And I wanted to make it in 3D. I wanted to learn some Marvelous Designer stuff, add some AI stills, kind of all that. And the way that I got that I learned something really interesting on that project that I wanted to share here. Where'd it go? thing called Mocap transfer. So basically what I did here is I had this rigged image, this rigged character here, right? And T-pose, super chill, but I wanted to add this motion of this mocap clip in. So then I went in here, I go to, where is it? Rigging, character definition. You go extract skeleton, it picks basically takes what you're mixing in Mo rig, it creates sort of an extract, so it basically lets you how many joints and everything it has. You create a solver, and then you go over here, and you do the same thing. It's really cool. You go, same thing. You open in manager, extract skeleton. You create a solver. Oh, actually, you just extract the skeleton. Then you go down here, and let's pray that this works here live. You drop it in, and then when you get to here, it should work. Oops. Hold on, let's try this again. I'm missing a step somewhere here. I think I have it in this other one. This is a little embarrassing. Shoot. In theory, that should work. I might have been doing it backwards. Let me try it another way. But what it does is it essentially references this mocap data onto this T-pose so that we can then source it from a separate mocap to a single T-pose. Now, the reason that that's really interesting and helpful is for a case where, like this, hold on. Because sometimes you want to be able to, wow, where is everything here? All right, now we're talking. Sometimes you want to be able to mix between this motion capture data. I think it's one of the most interesting ways to transition between different motion captures. So what then I can do here is go back over to animate, add another motion clip. Actually, wait a minute. Where is it? Shoot. Essentially what I do is I drop the second motion capture data into here, and I can slide it around like this, sort of like a time, like a layer on a timeline, and then you can start to overlap it so that when you then move forward, wow, this really isn't doing anything that I'm wanting it to do, but it's basically transitions between different motion capture clips. And what's really kind of cool about that is that you can then get as much motion capture as you want from Mixamo, from Rococo, from stuff you film, and then blend them together to create one sort of seamless movement between these different clips, control the speeds, and kind of get all that to sort of work seamlessly. So that's it for that. Maybe we go a little bit simpler here and I can show you some of my just design workflows here. One of the ways that I like to work here is really basic setup of, actually, you know what? Sorry, I'm not used to this setup. But one of the ways that I like to work is simple camera, then I come into my basic sort of shapes. And then I come into my redshift setup here. I like to have it all sort of live. And the way that I like to do it for those design dailies that I showed you guys up front is in a very, very sort of simplified way where I light my objects singularly from with one light setup, and then I set up my background light and wall completely separately. And then I'll go into here, as you can see, I'll pull that back. And that becomes sort of that becomes one light setup here. You can kind of see that start to happen here. Where's my materials? Well, I apologize. I'm super thrown off by the setup. Why is... But essentially what I end up doing is lighting this one way. I go, and then my shapes are all basically off of this one center point here that I then light completely separately via it's either a spot or area light, and then play around with different lighting configurations kind of from there. And what this lets me do is sort of control my objects pretty individually. Now there's this other cool little thing that I really like here, which is called add a target in null. And it basically makes it so that I can then just sort of move my lights around however I want while keeping it focused on one single center point. So like I can go, do this kind of a thing, do that kind of a thing. This is where traditional photography really starts to kick in. And it becomes basically, this becomes sort of my key light. I then go in over here and add, a light fill from one other side over here, maybe. And then my single favorite trick for all of this is then, so that becomes my fill. And then my single favorite trick is always to do basically a backlight, basically a rim light behind it that then goes here, and then when we go back to, it kind of becomes this little bit of a background sort of thing going on here. And this becomes basically a rim that then I can kind of, I start to play with the textures, I start to play with how to basically control the light via even the textures a little bit, and kind of so on from there. So I know this seems super crude and basic, but this becomes essentially what ultimately becomes like these types of renders. These end up just being kind of a rim light, one key light coming from above, and then a subtle fill that comes from the left or right, and then I light the background as its own light hitting that wall, mainly so I can create that kind of vignette feeling. The breakdown on these is my colors are generally tend to be, it's basically a mix of Maxon noise on a ramp, and then I just pick basic colors from there, and then I'll have a reflection with the roughness cranked up pretty high so that I get this nice little soft edge, and that lets me control kind of how the light hits the model, but in a really controllable way. And the majority of these are that exact same setup, just played around with different lighting movements and angles, switching around, different color and comp configurations. And then when I get to something like this is just a simplified version where I just have a really strong key light from the top kind of down. And then, you know, this is this setup, but with the reflection cranked up really high on the objects themselves, and then I crank the IR up even more to get this sort of like remarkably surreal reflection pass that makes these compositions. And then really it's just about bend deformers and putting objects on helixes and that kind of a thing, and then just moving things around, rotating to just sort of essentially get what ends up being, you know, sort of a pretty composition and abstraction that way. And then similarly with these, all of these are my favorite tool in the world to make a lot of this stuff is basically a spline wrap, which I can show you how that works here too. It's really cool. You go in, let's see if I can do it here. Like, yeah, we can do it here. You basically take a spline, you go down here to spline wrap. I then go in here, I null it, I put, let's say we'll put a capsule on it, why not? And then I come down here and I basically just drop the spline in, and it adds the shape, and you can put any shape in here, extrusion, whatever, and it assigns it and wraps it around the spline in a way that and then you can animate, bend, all of that on the spline. Now this looks nice and cruddy, right? But it's just as simple as coming over here, you crank up your caps, crank up your rotation, crank up your rotate. There you go. And then voila, you're getting this really nice bended shape that you can then control around, make cool, you know, sort of configurations with. If you don't want it to come all the way around the edge there, you can keep the length. See there, you can then come up and be like, whoop, I only want it to go that far. Or you could come back here, you fit the spline like that, and then you come down to these guys here, and you can control how much of it fills that space. Then here you go to, you know, you can offset it, you can animate that. That ends up being something that I use a lot in motion and kind of do stuff like that. Then if you come down to the size here, this is also really cool. Like, let's say it looks a little bit like a hot dog and a little bit boring. Then you come down here with control click, you add points. You can start to play with that, make it look kind of blobby. And then you come back up here, which I like, and then you start, you know, you can really play around and start to get some really crazy kind of abstractions just by messing around with a mix of this radius, playing with this stuff, and then also back up here, then playing around with things like the offset and that kind of a thing. And then, you know, sometimes in motion you can create, you know, you can really start to animate these and create these sort of xylophone effects and kind of all that. So, long story short, my work is really just a play of just a lot of deformers and abstractions and really sort of found elements that I just try to break with a mixture of cloner objects and Mograph tools. And then really just sort of BS my way through it to just the right angle of what looks good. Like, the majority of these shapes are the spline wrap to create legs and arms and shapes and all that. But if you looked at it from the side, the arms don't even attach to the body, to anything. It's just about getting just the right positioning to control the light at different depths and layers and directions to make it look good and not have shadows bouncing off and on and around too much. So, that's it. Sorry for the technical sort of difficulties here, but that's my work in general, and yeah, super stoked to be here, and thank you guys for being here as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, PJ. Great work. Always love your stuff. It's exciting, full of color and motion. PJ will be in the back for another hour at our demo station that all of our artists are at after each of the presentations. Sorry, Internet, you're going to have to come join us next time, and you can chat with PJ. If not, find him online. Very interactive. Up next, we have our very own Sakani Solomon. It's been years, and I finally got him back to the stage. So stay tuned. We'll be up next in about 12 minutes. See you soon.